Hello YouTube, and welcome to the next episode of the Godzilla Vlogs, where we talk about anything and everything Godzilla. But let's talk about the music of Shin Godzilla. Now, the music for Shin Godzilla, it's the latest Godzilla movie that just came out, in case you're living under a rock, was composed by Shiro Sagisu, which came as no surprise to me, knowing that both Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi were involved in this movie. Shinji Higuchi, Hideaki Anno, and Shiro Sagisu are kind of buddy-buddy. They're kind of like Ishiro Honda, Eiji Tsuburaya, and Akira Fukube back in the Showa era. However, I haven't really heard much composed by Shiro Sagisu other than what he's done for the Evangelion series and for the Attack on Titan movies directed by Shinji Higuchi. But what I've heard from him, I've genuinely liked. I don't just like, I love, especially his music for anything Evangelion, be it the show or be it the movies. What I've discovered from what I've listened to him in just about all of his scores that I've listened to is that he uses a lot of strings and he uses a very small choir. And usually the choir is singing in English. Their lyrics are in English. At least that was for the Evangelion series. Shin Godzilla is no exception to that. Shin Godzilla has a few tracks that have lyrics in it, such as Under the Burning Sky and my personal favorite, Persecution of the Masses, which has very ominous lyrics if you actually look up the lyrics. It's very hard to understand what the choir is saying if you're just listening to the music, but once you see the lyrics and connect the dots, it's very ominous, and I'm very curious to see if that at all fits the themalities of the film. This score, his score, Shiro Sagisu's score for Shin Godzilla was much bigger than I anticipated. I wasn't anticipating something like his early rebuilds of Evangelion music, which those were bigger than Neon Genesis Evangelion, but they weren't huge. There have been several animes where the music was much bigger than that. But I was expecting something along those lines given the budget for this film. The budget for Shin Godzilla. And as a result, this music in Shin Godzilla is much larger than what we got in Godzilla 2014, Legendary Pictures Godzilla. In fact, I'm going to say this, I prefer this score, Shiro Sagisu's score, to Alexander Desplat's score. Now that's not saying that Alexander Desplat made a bad score. I was a little underwhelmed by it when I first listened to it, but as I watched the movie, I appreciated the score more, and actually I really like it now. In fact, I listen to it quite frequently when I'm working on some stuff. It's so funny that they've got a bigger Godzilla music here, a bigger score for Shin Godzilla than they do in Godzilla 2014, considering the fact that Shin Godzilla had less than a quarter of the budget of Godzilla 2014. Less than a quarter, but yet it's still bigger somehow at the same time. However, I will say this, despite the fact that I'm saying this is a pretty big score, it's not the biggest Godzilla score. The biggest Godzilla score, hands down, comes from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, composed by Michiru Oshima. And the reason why that was the biggest score ever was because they actually used the Moscow Philharmonic Orchestra for the music in that film. And that's probably why overall that soundtrack is my second favorite soundtrack to ever come from a Godzilla movie, period, right behind Mothra vs. Godzilla. As an example of some of the bigness of this music, I think it really comes across in the Taba strategy and Under the Burning Sky. It doesn't matter which version of Under the Burning Sky you listen to, they're all pretty big. The only thing that I really have a complaint about with this score that I don't really care for is I don't like bongos. For some reason there's bongos used in some of the tracks in this movie. I don't really care for bongos at all. At the same time, they use that shit in Evangelion, so part of me is just like, it's probably just a homage to Evangelion. If that's the one thing I have to really complain about with the score, it's a pretty damn good score. You see, with Godzilla 2014, I really needed to see the movie to call the score good. Because what happened was I listened to it before I saw the movie. I listened to the soundtrack for Godzilla 2014 before I saw the movie. I didn't care for it. In fact, I went on an episode of Sons of Serizawa and said I thought it was very, very generic, and I was let down because Alexander Desplat usually does some pretty good shit. His music for the Harry Potter series, when he took over the reins, was pretty good. And I was a little let down. However, what I did notice about it was that it lacked the use of brass instruments and used a lot of strings. which is something new. You know, or something that used to be big but got replaced with brass. You know, like composers such as Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer's probably the most famous composer alive now. He uses a lot of brass. He doesn't use much for strings. I mean, he does use them, but they usually don't take the forefront. The Godzilla 2014 soundtrack, the strings were the forefront, and the brass instruments were kind of like the backup, which I thought was interesting. However, when I saw the movie, when I actually sat down and saw Godzilla 2014, I liked the score more and went back and listened to the soundtrack and enjoyed it more because now I have a visual representation with the music. In fact, that happens with a lot of soundtracks. A lot of soundtracks actually are aided by the visuals. Once you see the visuals, they make you appreciate the soundtrack more because they usually fit with the music, which is good. That's the sort of standard way to look at it. There are certain examples to that, such as Daft Punk's score to Tron Legacy and M83's score to Oblivion. With Shin Godzilla, though, and this is to me the sign of a really good score, a really good score, is I did not need to see the movie to like the score and appreciate the score. And what I mean by that is I haven't seen as the time I'm making this video, I have not seen Shin Godzilla. I have not seen the movie in full. I've seen clips of it, but I have not seen the movie in full. I have only listened to the soundtrack, and I liked it a lot. In fact, the track Persecution of the Masses I often listen to now with my headphones on because I like the track so much. Persecution of the Masses, by the way, is my favorite track on the album. The fact that I love this score as much as I do, and I hum it, and I whistle it, and, you know, I kind of, it's in my head a lot, is a testament to the composition of the music, and to me, the signs of a really good score. An example of a movie where you don't need to see the movie, or a couple examples where you don't need to see the movie, but yet the score is still really good. Look at the original Star Wars film. You can listen to the original Star Wars music without any knowledge of the movie at all and love the music. I don't recommend doing this, but if you have no idea about the Lord of the Rings trilogy, know nothing about it, no images, no nothing, and just listen to the music, you can really appreciate the music. Those are just two really, really big examples. This version, though nowhere near as big as either Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, I can listen to the music on its own and find it very enjoyable. In fact, a better comparison that I can really think of in recent years is actually the Pacific Rim soundtrack. The Pacific Rim soundtrack, I loved the score before I saw the movie, and this is an example of that. Now, Shiro Sagisu is being accused on YouTube by a bunch of trolls. He's being accused of reusing tracks from other works in this work, and it's very true. Though we're going to get into something that I don't think is the really big reason why. Specifically, he reused some of his Evangelion stuff in this movie, in Shin Godzilla. And a lot of you probably know which track I'm talking about. It's the music that whenever they're discussing a plan to stop an angel in Evangelion, that's the music that is being used in Shin Godzilla. I think this is actually done mainly because Hideaki Anno said do it, because Hideaki Anno was one of the editors of the movie. Hideaki Anno said do it because it would be an Easter egg for his fans. And, you know, someone like me who heard that drum beat, I literally said, fuck yeah. I was so happy to hear it because that music works really good with people planning things out, and I know that's what it's going to be used in the movie for. But a lot of people were complaining that he lacks originality because all of his scores sound the same. Well, to rebut on that, I want to just say that many composers reuse their own stuff anyways. Jerry Goldsmith, for example, if you listen to the music for Star Trek Insurrection, it's identical to the music he uses in U.S. Marshals. Akira Ifukube, listen to 90% of his tracks. In fact, there is a track by Akira Ifukube in the soundtrack for Shin Godzilla, and it's the Battle in Outer Space March. The Battle in Outer Space March took the Japanese Navy March from the original Godzilla and the naval marches from Varan the Unbelievable and smushed them all together, and that's the track. He didn't rewrite any music, he just kind of threw them all together. And that was all done because he was making so many films per year that he didn't really have time to really create something original. Which sounds like it's a huge detriment, but it's not, because you still somehow manage to make a lot of his scores work. Some of them really lack originality, but a lot of them are still really good. And a lot of the problem with the Akira Ifukube is that, again, he had so little time to write a score, he often only could do take one. If you listen to his symphony works, not his scores, his symphony works, they are often a lot better, because he had more time to pen them out and write them out and so on and so forth, and as a result, basically perfect them, and to basically add a new spin to them, and they often sound better. My favorite example of this is listen to Gautama the Buddha, which was the ballet he wrote, and that score, it's 45, 46 minutes long, and it's just so gorgeous. It is just beautiful. Especially the last, 10 minutes of it. Oh my god. But another example is Bernard Herrmann, for another classical composer. Bernard Herrmann, the opening to Mysterious Island, where the battles are going on, is almost identical to the music that he used in Jason and the Argonauts, where the Argonauts are fighting the Harpies. It's almost identical, and he often uses that same motif of the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. He often uses that same kind of motif in just about all of his scores. He reuses the same thing over and over again. Composers, in the end, composers just do that a lot. So I think that whenever somebody complains that all soundtracks kind of sound similar and kind of sound, or made by a composer, they complain that they all sound similar, whatever, I think it's kind of a moot point because of that. Composers just do that all the time. John Williams does it all the time. I can tell a John Williams score when I hear it. Usually within the first couple seconds I can tell it's a John Williams score, because he has a style. Every composer has a style. Now, something that I noticed about Shin Godzilla, and we're getting close to the end here, something that I noticed about the Shin Godzilla soundtrack is that the Shin Godzilla soundtrack sounds very operatic. There are tracks that sound unbelievably operatic. Like if you listen to a stereotypical opera where the fat lady is singing, no, not Divine, but the fat lady is singing, there's some tracks in here that sound like that. Specifically the track Tragedy, which was used in, I believe, the second big teaser trailer for Shin Godzilla. I believe it was the second trailer. And you hear that track, and it sounds very operatic to me. The way how the stringed instruments kind of swarm around the lyrics, and how it's just this girl singing that leads into a choir. I just think that sounds very operatic, and it doesn't really surprise me considering what Hideaki Anno likes in his music. If you listen to any of his works, be it Gunbuster, Evangelion, or any of his works really, where he's really emotionally invested in it and stuff like that, they often have sort of an operatic kind of emotion behind them. They often have this sort of operatic sense about it, because oftentimes, specifically in Evangelion, it's something huge, and operas are often about something huge. They're about a huge thing about self-sacrifice, or about a man learning who he is, or two people falling in love. Something big. That's what opera is. Opera is big. I suppose it can be small, but I haven't heard any operas that are really small. Shin Godzilla is no exception. Specifically Tragedy, that sounds very, very operatic. And I think there's another track called Defeat Is Not an Option. That also sounds very operatic. And Anno even often used actual opera music in his works. Look at the last 15 episodes of Neon Genesis Evangelion. He often used big operatic symphony pieces as actual music in his movies, and so on and so forth. And oftentimes the soundtrack for Shin Godzilla has a waltz to it. There's sort of a constant loop going on with the music as well, where everything just kind of swings. If you listen to it, you'll count. It goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I'm not a music person, so I don't really know what the terms are, but all I can think of is a waltz. I'm sure my friends who are into music right now are just turning in anger at my idiocy, but that's oftentimes, that sort of beat, the sort of circle and everything like that, was often used in the Romantic period. Composers like Wagner and Beethoven and so on and so forth, they often used that kind of round circle sort of style of music, be it a beat of 3 or a beat of 4. So it just often, it grabbed me that this, I liked the fact that it sounded operatic. I genuinely did. As for the Ifukube music pieces that have been selected for this movie, which, yes, actually a decent chunk of the soundtrack is actually reused Ifukube music, I was very happy, because, you know, Ifukube is my second favorite composer of all time. Of course I'm going to be happy, but I was glad they're actually using the Godzilla theme in this movie. Because, to be honest, I was quite disappointed that they didn't actually use it at least once in Godzilla 2014, like during the credits or something. I was a little disappointed with that. But of course, we've had Godzilla movies in the past where they haven't used the Godzilla theme at all, so it wasn't a big deal. But I was very happy to see that they're bringing some Ifukube tracks back into this movie. Now, I'm not sure how those tracks are actually going to be used in the actual movie. Hopefully they work, maybe they won't, I don't know, I haven't seen it, can't really critique on it. But it just made me happy that they were being used overall. In fact, this movie, quite frankly, is actually pulling something very similar to Godzilla vs. Biol Auntie. For those of you who don't know, Godzilla vs. Biol Auntie actually used a lot of reused Ifukube scores mixed with an original score composed by the man who did the music for Dragon Ball Z. Which, by the way, I think the Ifukube music is by far the best parts of that soundtrack in Biol Auntie. I love that movie. But they're doing that here. They're using some old Ifukube tracks mixed with the new stuff composed by Shiro Sagisu, which is cool. I'm totally down for that, and I understand why they're doing it, because let's face it, when you think of Godzilla, or specifically Godzilla music, 9 times out of 10, someone's going to say a piece of music written by Akira Ifukube. Akira Ifukube is the epitome of Godzilla music, so it makes sense why they would pull something back here. I would do that if I ever was able to make the Godzilla saga into a series of movies, or an anime, or an animated series, or a radio drama or something. I would use bits and pieces of Akira Ifukube, because Akira Ifukube just embodies Godzilla. And so I was pretty happy that they're reusing stuff here. And they have a genuinely good track listing. I was genuinely happy when I heard the Battle in Outer Space music start playing on my CD player, because Battle in Outer Space's score is awesome. Probably Akira Ifukube's grandest score, not his biggest, but his most grandest, most rousing score comes from Battle in Outer Space. So it made me very happy to hear it in that film. But also to hear music, not just from the Showa era, but you also have a couple tracks from the Heisei series. Specifically, the one that comes to mind is the opening credit music from Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. That soundtrack is awesome, and so it made me very happy to also hear that as well. So, I think their choices, their selection was very good anyways. So, in the end, go on Facebook, like AN Production for all up-to-date information on what we are doing. Join Geeks for Geeks if you want to have weird, random conversations about Divine and how awesome John Waters is. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment explaining how stupid I am. I get that a lot. Or how awesome I am. I don't get that so much. And stay tuned for more updates on the Godzilla saga. Make sure to like that on Facebook for all up-to-date information there. In the end, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions saying, sayonara.